Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Jennifer Scherze. I'm a Senior Marketing Manager here at Kognito, and I will be your host for today's session. We're really excited to talk to you today about the effective communication skills that can really help college students thrive. I'm joined by a panel of experts today, including Kim Weiland, our product lead for higher education here at Kognito, Hailey Hardcastle, a recent college graduate and student youth mental health ambassador, as well as Dr. Glenn Albright, co-founder and director of research here at Kognito. So let's go ahead and meet our presenters. Kim, I'm going to turn the presentation over to you.
Thank you so much, Jen. So I am Kim Weiland. I lead our product side for higher education here at Kognito. I've been here a little over 5 years now, and I always tell everyone I have the dream job because I get to work with universities and students and really focus in on building some of these amazing programs that really help students build out some of these skills that we'll talk about today. I'll turn it over to Hailey.
Hello, everyone. I am Hailey Hardcastle. I am a youth mental health advocate. I've been advocating for students in the mental health field for about 6 years now. During that time, I've passed a law here in my home state of Oregon. I've developed a coalition of other young leaders who are passionate about mental health. I've worked in various nonprofits and policy initiatives, as well as I draw on my lived experience in all of my advocacy. I was named one of Teen Vogue's 21 under 21 young people changing the world, and I have a TED Talk about why students should have mental health days. This is what I love spending my time doing, and something I really believe in is using storytelling in order to inspire these conversations and allow vulnerability for our community. So I'm excited to be here and continue this conversation with all of you today. And I'll pass it off to Glenn.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for attending the webinar. Hailey, I was thinking that, maybe it's a good idea for faculty and staff and students to have a mental health day. Because we certainly experience sometimes a significant amount of stress, and I'm speaking to you as a former chair and a psychology professor at Baruch College, which is one of the senior colleges of the City University of New York. And I'm also co-founder and director of research at Kognito, with my main responsibility is to conduct efficacy studies to ensure the product is doing exactly what it claims to be doing. Nice to be here with you today.
I'd like to get us started here by opening up with my story. Like I said, I like to draw on my lived experience and all of my advocacy, and I think it really helps to put a face to what we're talking about here. So my mental health journey began when I was just a child. My mom had me when she was 19 years old. We grew up together, just her and I. I had felt the adversity of life before I even entered kindergarten. Growing up with a single mom, low income, moving around a lot. In school, I loved being there. My teachers always called me a worrier. I was really worried about getting perfect scores, worried about what the other kids were doing. I was worried about how things were going at home. When I came to school, I had a lot more on my mind than just the schoolwork, of course. This worrying was pretty normal until the end of my kindergarten year. It became a bit more alarming. I was all of a sudden worried about touching certain colors, certain numbers scared me, touching certain foods. I was picking at my nails, disengaged in class, really worried about bathroom breaks, about being alone with anyone. The worry became way more serious than you would see in a typical child, and luckily people noticed. A few of my teachers raised concern, and my mom noticed at home, and we found out I had been abused. So my mom reached out for support, and I am so grateful that my community and my school district were there to support me. I was able to talk with my school counselors, talk with my teachers at school, and they offered my mom skills to take home as well. I know that I'm a recent college graduate, and I know that I would not be able to be here today without the skills that I was offered at such a young age. That experience at such a young age had the potential to really derail my schooling experience, derail large parts of my life, but instead I was able to develop really key emotional and communication skills before a lot of my peers were able to have that opportunity. And I know that that early intervention was incredibly important to my future success. Next slide. Because of this early intervention in school, and because I found school as a safe place, I became way overly involved. Throughout the years, I became a leader among my peers, got perfect grades, spent as many hours as I could in the school building. I'm sure you know a few students like this. That was just where I wanted to be and what I wanted to do. I was the president of every club on every sports team. And my mental health journey kind of re-began in high school when we were turned to as student leaders with questions about what to do about our peers' mental health challenges. My school district had experienced a number of suicides while I was a junior in high school, and our administrators reached out to us as student leaders for answers. You know, what should we do about your peers? How can we best support you guys right now? What do you need? So we were lucky enough to get together, just me and my peers, and come up with all of these wild ideas about what we wanted to see. And the one that we landed on was House Bill 2191. This allows students to take mental health days off of schools. Like you mentioned, Glenn, we can all use some of those. And it's just the same as you would a physical health day. The parents still need to call. It will be documented within the school as a mental health day, and you're only allowed so many of them within, depending on the district that you live in. But the really important, the key here is it equalizes physical and mental health, and it opened up a conversation amongst parents, school districts, teachers, peers about mental health, again, at a really young age. You know, this is available as early as kindergarten. I remember my mom calling me out for mental health days. Of course, we didn't call them that at the time, but it sure would have been helpful if we had that kind of language. So having the language to talk about this stuff was a big motivator behind getting this bill passed and allowing everybody to become a part of the conversation. And I'll talk a little bit more later about how just having that language allowed us to move on to, you know, more serious forms of advocacy and support students in better and better ways as the years went on. And I'm going to pass it off to Glenn to talk a little bit more about what these early childhood traumatic experiences can do later in life.
Thank you so much, Hailey, and thank you for your contribution and all the good work that you are doing. I want to talk a little bit about what we call adverse childhood experiences. It's something that a lot of people aren't aware of, and in these types of presentations, you usually talk about the percentage of students who are experiencing, like, say, anxiety disorders, depressive disorders, and so on. And not enough attention is given to ACEs. And ACEs, or adverse childhood experiences, were actually designated by the CDC as the #1 public health concern before COVID-19 because of its impact on both mental and physical health. And ACEs are really determined by a simple 10-item questionnaire that addresses events that occurred between ages 0 and 18. It involves things like, did a parent or other adult in your household swear at you or insult you or hit you or made you really afraid or physically hurt you? And it also addresses questions on sexual abuse or household member being incarcerated or problem drinker, divorce in the household, etc. And really very, very scary is that over 50% of the ACEs occur before the age of 5, and 30% of those in the first 2 years of life. And they have a significant impact on students. In fact, as you can see there, at least 61% of the population has 1 ACE, and 16% or more have 4 ACEs. So that's scary, considering its impact on our students' ability to navigate the academic process. And if we can go on to the next slide, please. So we know that ACEs can impact executive functioning, which includes your ability to reason, to solve problems, to be able to strategize. It can affect memory systems, emotional regulation, your ability to concentrate or pay attention, It also increases the risk of learning disabilities and certainly social and behavioral problems within the classroom. And it also dramatically increases the risk of depression and anxiety. And one thing that's not on the slide that's important to mention, and Hailey, you mentioned it actually in terms of what a wonderfully studious student you were and how you excelled academically and in sports and so on. And in some cases, students who have high ACEs, who grew up in an unsafe environment, uh, react to this by having a perfectionism, mostly in response to trying to please a parent, mostly in response to trying to create a safer, more navigable environment. Next slide, please.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, Glenn, ACEs can sometimes cause students to overperform just to navigate the environment that they're in. So moving on in my story, once I got to college, right, this is when I kind of let the walls down and a lot of that trauma from the early years came back. And I found myself revisiting those skills, that language and the communication skills that I had learned when I was just 5 or 6 years old, um, and trying to figure out how does this fit into my life now as a college student. We know that a lot of this trauma can come back as a young adult. Something that I was lucky enough to have access to was as a mental health advocate, I was already plugged into a lot of spaces around campus. I joined the student advisory board for my counseling center. I was a part of a few different mental health nonprofits, and my peer group was generally, pretty well educated about mental health. But still, college was a huge struggle for me, being around all of these triggers and being on my own for the first time to deal with this trauma on my own. This is when I came across Kognito. I found it naturally when I joined the student advisory board for the counseling center. We were required to take it in order to be a part of this group. And I still remember taking it alone in the library one night just as a part of my regular homework, but I was way more engaged in it than most of the online sort of homework platforms that we use because it was so applicable to my life and to what I was seeing around me. I took the peer-to-peer at-risk health for students program, and I was able to see parts of myself, in the student who was struggling. I was able to see pieces of my peers in it, pieces of, my roommate or situations I had been seeing all around me. After I took this, I thought, well, why is this only required for student leaders on campus? What about students who are never going to walk into the counseling center, let alone join the student advisory board for it? So at our next meeting at the next month, we decided to put together a campaign to get Kognito into the hands of as many students as we could across campus. Some ways that we did this were, of course, we promoted it on social media, but we incentivized it as much as we could. We offered raffles for gift cards. We offered gift cards to local ice cream places. Every single student who completed it got a free scoop. And it was really great to see these incentives work, but we wanted it to be a little bit more ingrained in campus. I was, reflecting on how it would have been even more beneficial the earlier I had access to it. So we also spearheaded a campaign to try to get it wrapped into our student orientations. That way every freshman has to take it as a part of their orientation to college life. And we're still in the works of that right now. So hopefully soon. Next slide, please. So now I'm a recent college graduate as of just a few weeks. And as I sit here reflecting on all of my years of schooling, the good, the bad, how much it really shaped me into the person I am and all of the opportunities I've come across, including, taking things like Kognito, I realize one of the biggest parts of school is not just the academic side. It is, of course, building those social skills, the communication skills, to support me in being a well-adjusted adult. I know, as I said earlier, that early intervention when I was a child allowed me to have the self-advocacy skills to succeed later in life. Something as simple as having a conversation with one of my college professors, asking for an extension or asking for more help. I learned those skills at such a young age. And it was completely essential to me graduating. Now being a student advocate, I get asked a lot how I'm doing, or everybody wants the story to kind of wrap up neatly. And to that, I really want people to know, as I'm sure you're all aware, life ebbs and flows. So I'm not better now. It's just different. And now I have the tools to make every day easier to navigate. So of course, everything feels a little bit better, but mental health will never go away. We're all going to experience it here and there, but having the tools can make it that much easier to navigate. And in addition to me having the tools, I'm able to pass these skills on to my younger siblings, my peers around me, and change the story for really my whole community. One of the most beautiful parts of my college experience was coming back home, back to the environment that I grew up in, and sharing the skills that I had learned, such as active listening through the Kognito program, and practicing that with my family to be able to share those skills and create a healthier environment for everyone. And I would really urge anybody who has the chance to kind of practice those skills and figure out where they can plug into your life. Thank you guys for giving me the opportunity to share my story today as well.
Hailey, thank you so much. It was a beautiful story. And the work that everybody who's on this call and all of us are engaged in, it's big work and it's complex and it's nuanced. And some days it can feel very overwhelming, especially as you said, Hailey, life ebbs and flows. We're still working on ourselves while also working on behalf of others. And we also need our own network of support that we're working on, as well as building that out for others. And so to hear your story continues to inspire us, and to hear other stories continues to inspire us. So thank you for being willing to share that. And I just want to build off of where you were really saying around the skills. What's so interesting, if you want to go to the next slide, is that as Hailey's story illustrated, building out these skills is something that we're all working on. Individuals are working on themselves. Elementary, middle, and high school educators are also working on helping to support these skills. So I have, for those of you who recognize that on that right, that is actually Castle's 5 competencies and skills there. And I put that there to show that, this is work that so many people are really focusing on. What does it mean to support student well-being and our own well-being through skill building? And what does that look like at different stages of development? What's so great about that this work is starting earlier and earlier and earlier is that by the time students get to college, that is a huge transition moment. As Hailey said, being away from home, now navigating these things on my own, that's very different than what it looks like sometimes when you're at home. So what we're hoping to talk about today is really how we continue to upskill, knowing that all students are coming with different skills and from different places and different backgrounds as they come onto campus. If you want to go to the next slide. Where we really want to focus, and the work that we're doing here at Kognito, is how do we focus in on those communication skills that are sort of at the center and the crux of so many of the interactions that we have with others, as well as even the conversations we have with ourselves. What does that internal communication look like? Are we beating ourselves up? Are we talking to ourselves about building support, as well as all of those conversations that we're having across differences and supporting others and those types of things? What we know around conversations is that we all have communication strategies that we have learned, that we have seen modeled, that we know work. Some of them are good, many of them are not great. Before I came back to education and back to public health here at Kognito, I actually took a little bit of a detour in my career, and I worked with some of the largest corporations in the US on building out leadership training for their emerging leaders. And we would do surveys and talk to corporations about what are the most important skills that you need to build in your emerging leaders. And they would always say communication skills. At the end of the day, it always came back to communication skills. And so this isn't a new thing. This continues to be sort of the crux of what our interactions look like with others, what our interpersonal skills are, how do we support others while also supporting ourselves. Do you want to go to the next slide? So what we're really trying to do here at Kognito is move some of those conversations to more effective conversations. And what many of us haven't had the opportunity to do is always get feedback on our communication strategies, be able to practice those communication strategies and build better ones. And so what we are trying to do with our simulations is really give students the opportunity to not only have knowledge about different interactions that they might have and better ways to communicate, and that through building out their knowledge, but also giving them the opportunity to practice those and build their confidence in those skills. So many of these conversations are already happening. So can we move it from a conversation that unintentionally maybe reblames a survivor and re-traumatizes them to one that is really using trauma-informed communication and is really supporting that survivor? Can we build up their skills to use bystander skills and feel confident in using those, as well as some of the really basic things around, can we help students communicate boundaries and help others learn how to effectively respect other people's boundaries, not using things like guilt or anger or those. So we're really looking to move a negative impact to a positive impact and really support students thriving, their experience, their inclusion on campus, and really get the most out of what it means to build those skills during their time in college. You want to go to the next slide? So we talk a lot about practice-based learning. This is not new. I think everybody who does learning knows that it's proven that if you can practice something, you're able to build confidence and to do that thing. If it's just knowledge, it's really, really hard to feel confident that you're going to be able to do that skill if you've never had the opportunity to practice. So what we're really trying to do is not only give them that knowledge, what are those communication skills, and Glenn's going to talk more about some of those, and I'll talk a little bit later on, but then to give them a chance to practice, and so importantly is to give feedback. And we do feedback in different ways. Some of it is just feedback from how that person responds to you in the simulation. If you say something judgmental, they're going to respond to you by not opening up and feeling judged. That gets you to be more reflective about those types of things. But we also have coaching feedback. It's all positive feedback. We're not, oh, you did that wrong. We're, hey, try this. And then you get to practice and try something else. That ability to do that allows you to continue towards improvement in how those conversations are going, improvement in your confidence to have those conversations. So really, we're going to show you some of this. So we know that it is important to cover some of these topics like alcohol and other drugs, things that students are going to encounter, scenarios, but also places that you're able to drive engagement, which is the other flip side of this, right? You want students to take it. You want to encourage them to build these skills in the spaces that they're going to do it. And we all know not everybody wants to do something that isn't required. So we've really worked with universities. They've come to us and said, hey, we need to do a training around Title IX, but we want it to be more than just knowledge. We really want to change some of these conversations. Can you help us do that? Yes, we can. So while it's based around these topics, I will tell you these are transferable communication skills. They really, as Hailey spoke to beautifully, are the skills that are going to help them be a well-rounded adult and really succeed, not only in college, but after. So as we queue up just a little bit of demo, I will say we do not run it through our own system on GoToMeeting. And the reason for that is because it tends to have a significant lag because it is a full simulation. And we want you to experience it with a little bit more flow. So you will get access to this specific one for having attended, and you'll have a 7-day trial to actually go in and try it out. But this is just a small snippet of how it works.
Everything in my life is such a mess. I don't see how I could ever fix it. Sometimes I wish I could just stop, not have to deal with any of it anymore.
So you'll see that you get some feedback. This was early on in the conversation, and they're just kind of letting you know that this seems like an area where you might want to ask about suicide, and just reiterating that asking that question does not put that idea in his head, and that's really important to make sure that students know that. Now you get to choose to talk, and you get lots of options.
Are you talking about suicide?
Let's talk about something else, okay? It's been a hard few months, that's all. I don't know. I guess I sound like a real loser, I'm sorry.
Kev, come on. Please don't apologize. You don't sound like a loser. You're dealing with a lot right now.
Yeah.
You can potentially fall into some pitfalls, like being a little bit judgmental of his struggle, downplaying his struggle, but it also gives you the chance to practice all of these scenario skills, which actually Glenn is going to spend some time talking about. We specifically do things like neutral observable behaviors, which gives you the ability to try out things that aren't judgmental, things that you've actually seen, like, hey, we haven't seen you come hang out with the friend group lately. What's going on? Reflections and open-ended questions, and really work through all of those strong communication skills. So again, it's a very, very tiny snippet, and I encourage you to take the trial and actually get to try it, talk through it, do the undo, play around in there, and see how you might improve your skills as well. So I'm going to turn it over to Glenn to talk about all those skills.
Thank you, Kim. You talked about asking a question, are you thinking about suicide? And I teach introduction to psychology classes. Some of them are very large, like the ones that maybe you took as an undergrad. And the other day, we were covering depressive disorders, and I gave them a scenario about a student who is withdrawn and isolated, and gave them some other symptoms of depression and may be suicidal. And I asked the class, if you think your friend might be suicidal, what would you say to them, or how would you communicate, or what would you ask to them? And it was very, very difficult for them to really answer that question. So in having a conversation with them, that it's okay to ask someone if they're thinking of suicide, and maybe before you ask that question, maybe just notice some behaviors first. I notice that you've been withdrawn or isolated, or you haven't been picking up on your emails or texting, and then express your concern. And that's so really important. And as you mentioned, it's not going to put the thought in their mind. It's just a hard question to ask. And these simulations give you practice at doing that. And that is so important. Part of that practice is motivational interviewing. That's a very well-studied evidence-based communication strategy, like asking open-ended questions as opposed to questions that can be answered with a yes or a no, like, hey, what's going on? Or tell me what's happening, or how can I help you? Then affirmational statements such as, oh, I really appreciate you coming in to talk. That's a great question. Or it's really hard to talk about these things, and you're doing a great job. Just kind of reaffirming them. And then reflective listening, just say back what they're saying to you, so you feel or it sounds like, to let them know that they're understood and that you're listening. And as you mentioned, that these strategies are useful in all conversations, whether it's, partners talking together, or you're talking to a child, a spouse, or, anybody. These facilitate open communication and create a safe environment where people are comfortable in opening up and telling you what's going on. The other part of this that I'm going to jump to is over on the right. You see that these simulations involve our ability to understand what we're feeling when we're talking to someone in a difficult conversation, what that person is feeling, and in part that involves mentalizing. Mentalizing is when you're kind of observing what's going on and reacting in an appropriate way that facilitates the communication. And that mentalizing is incredibly augmented by our ability to engage in empathy, or knowing what the person is feeling or feeling what the person's feeling. By the way, the difference between empathy and an empathic accuracy is empathy is you're feeling what they're saying, what they're feeling. Empathic accuracy is you kind of know what they're feeling, but you don't have to be feeling it yourself. And that will kind of like facilitate communications. And what's really kind of interesting is that all of these skills are actually identified as impacting certain areas of the brain when you engage in them. That's studies done with magnetic resonance imaging, where parts of the brain light up when you engage in mentalizing or emotional regulation. And we know that that facilitates communication. So real important. And Kim, do you want to carry on with this?
Sure. So as we've built out more and more programs beyond mental health, we've introduced even more types of communication. So trauma-informed communication is used in any of our programs where you're talking to somebody who is a survivor. And really the difference there from the active listening portions of motivational interviewing is that you actually are going to ask less questions. Really around trauma-informed communication is giving them that space to know that you've heard, you believe, really that you're there to help them explore their options, but you understand that it is their agency to determine what they choose to do next. And so that's a kind of an adjustment on some of the skills that you see under motivational interviewing, which some people also refer to as active listening. Hailey used that term as well. A lot of people call it that skill. And then assertive communication. I don't know that there's a great name to lump all of these communication skills under. Some people use assertive communication, some use other terms. But really this idea of, can you speak for yourself and others, and what does that look like? So when you're talking about refusal skills, what does that mean to kind of know what it is that you want and then be able to communicate that, whether it is about not doing something, but also the flip side of refusal skills is also even being able to communicate what you do want, right? So that's all part of what goes into refusal skills. It's not just no, it's also, I'd rather do this, right? Like, what can you communicate what it is that you do want as well? And that's something we're always working on, especially boundaries. That is an important skill we're always working on. And then bystander skills. Again, here they get to practice knowing that there isn't one right way to do bystander skills, just like there isn't one right way to do refusal skills. So they get to practice what feels right for them, try different ones in different scenarios, and really just build out that confidence to be able to speak on the behalf of others, or even to go to somebody and help delegate, which is also a communication skill. Can you go and talk to somebody else to help someone? I did put intent versus impact there on the right as well, just because when we're talking about some of our newer programs, when we're talking about communicating across differences, we do want to approach some of those communication, what I sort of call the spinning wheels, that we tend to get stuck in, that take communication and conversation sideways. So when we're trying to have communication across differences, we really want to give people the ability to think about impact, focus the conversation on impact, and not get stuck in that wasn't my intent, that wasn't my intent. That makes the other person feel like you're not hearing the impact, right? So those more communication strategies that we've continued to add as we've built out more programs. If you want to go to the next slide. Glenn, you want to talk about our virtual humans?
I do indeed. This is one of my favorite slides to talk about because there are so many advantages of having role plays with virtual humans compared to face-to-face with real humans. And it's interesting how the literature has really emphasized the point that when you and I role play with a virtual human, we're more likely to be ourselves. We feel like it's safer to open up and to experiment and to be curious about different language options or strategies that you can choose. So it kind of increases your level of engagement, and it decreases what are referred to as transference reactions. Transference is when you and I are talking to someone who reminds us of another person in our lives. It could be a mother, a father, a friend, an aunt, or an uncle. And so that transference begins to have an impact on our short-term memory and our ability to be able to process the learning. So the neutrality or the neutral appearance of our virtual characters kind of reduces these transference reactions. And then this next one I love because having these role plays decreases what we refer to as social evaluative threat. That is the uncomfortability we feel when we role play with instructors or with other participants there with us. We become anxious, we become afraid that we're going to be judged. There are a number of factors, again, that kind of like will start to flood our short-term memory or our working memory, so we pay less attention to what is being taught. Also, all these programs address implicit bias. They are reviewed by subject matter experts. That is their specific purpose. And they're effective across all races and ethnicities. This is an exciting part too, in part because the neutrality of the appearance, and also the evidence-based communication strategies we use are cross-cultural. MI is respected in every culture, so the strategies are easily assimilated and the practice can be effective in getting you learn how to actually use them in real life. So lots of great advantages of working with virtual humans. Next slide. Now, my role as a scientist, as a psychologist, is to examine the efficacy of our simulations. And we've adopted a model that has grown out of industrial organizational psychology that's used specifically to evaluate training programs within IO. And it's 4 levels, and level 1 are your typical satisfaction indices. Would you recommend the program? Did you like it? Et cetera, et cetera. Level 2 assesses the impact of the simulation on your knowledge and skills and attitudes. And as Kim alluded to earlier, that knowledge isn't always the best predictor of behavior. So we really focus in on attitudinal constructs. Did this program change your self-efficacy or your confidence to communicate? Did it prepare you better? Are you more likely to approach a fellow student and address your concerns? Because attitudinal constructs predict behavior change as opposed to knowledge items. And then level 3 is the actual impact on behavior. And level 4 is usually not obtainable on most of the studies done because you have to look at the overall impact on culture or the return on investment. Although we certainly are working on some level 4 studies now, which have not been done in the field, to my knowledge. Next slide, please. So in terms of efficacy, level 1 satisfaction and engagement measures, I mean, you see 98% have rated the program good, very good, or excellent. So it's incredibly highly rated. Learners say that it's interactive, provides them opportunities to practice, to be able to get feedback, to help them to be able to navigate these conversations more successfully. Scenarios are very realistic. And then it goes to level 2, your measures of attitudinal constructs, self-efficacy. And we know that if we can make you more confident in your ability to identify, to engage in a conversation, and recommend behavioral changes, that you're more likely to do it. And then the actual increases in behavior or in help seeking. So the self-reported increases in skill have been measured in follow-up surveys 2 months after the program has been taken. And we also collect a lot of qualitative data. Qualitative data or open-ended responses are incredibly important for understanding how the learners have integrated the program, giving examples of how they've helped other people, in some cases even helped themselves. So we see that a large percentage there, that 66% or 2/3, increase their proactive conversations with friends and students in college, in part because these communication skills are universal. They apply to everybody. Next slide, please. So we have published, and other authors within the field have published numerous journal articles on efficacy of these training simulations. And again, to be somewhat repetitious, they have been shown to increase self-efficacy of the learner, or their confidence to recognize when a student is exhibiting signs of psychological distress, to approach them, to talk to them, to integrate the use of MI training, motivational interviewing training skills, to create a safe environment where the student feels comfortable in opening up and revealing to you things that are distressing to them. So there's been an increase, significant increase, in the number of students identified, talked to, and referred to support services. And also, what I find to be really helpful and rewarding is that students who take the training themselves are more likely to seek help from themselves, in part because the training really, normalizes what we mean by mental health. It gives them a sense that, of what to do. And if they themselves are struggling, which we know a lot of students are struggling, they know how to and where to go to get help. So it's like train the trainer, where the trainer becomes more enabled themselves. It's pretty cool. Next slide.
So thank you, Glenn. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I mean, I just, want to say one more thing. I can't emphasize enough that in teaching these intro psych classes since, oh my God, 1981, that's a long time. I've had dozens and dozens of students come up and talk to me about things going on in their life and how this training has improved their ability to be able to recognize that they're experiencing stress in themselves or other people, how to engage in the conversation, and get help from the counseling center. So it's so rewarding to be part of this, to see such an impact on college students who are struggling so much these days, that we need more and more trainings like this.
Yeah, thank you so much, Glenn. I said earlier that this work is starting in, elementary school, middle school, high school, even before students get to school. But we also know that the last couple of years, ACEs was already a #1 public health concern. Then we had COVID, we had lost time in school. less social skills that students were building throughout those years. And having talked to many people on campus, students included, many of them feel like they're coming to campus with less skills than even students a couple years ago. I was just talking to somebody this morning who is on the threat assessment team and said, the amount of reports they've had to respond to because students don't know how to communicate sometimes when they're upset, and so they make threats, has just skyrocketed, right? So this can feel like these students need communication skills practice on steroids, but also, Glenn, to your point, faculty and staff being able to model some learning and communication strategies that maybe they haven't had the chance to see before. So big work that we're doing. I think it always sort of comes back to these qualitative ones where we can look beyond just data and really hear from students and faculty about what that looks like in real life. So I love, Hailey, you started us out with so many amazing examples from your own experience, but I know you've also really done a lot of student leadership and other pieces. So I'd love to hear some examples that come to your mind about how this kind of plays out in real life.
Absolutely. Of course, taking Kognito has allowed me to have better conversations personally. I can think of dozens of examples where I come home and I can see that my roommate, maybe is struggling a little bit that week. And instead of reacting with frustration that the house is messy or something wasn't done on time, I really know how to ask those questions and open up a better conversation to get her the support that she needed. But beyond those personal conversations, I want to talk about how this made a difference at an organizational level on my campus. One thing that I did when I came across Kognito is I served as the Secretary of Mental Health for our student government on campus. And I wanted that group, that sort of student club, to take it as well, because a part of my job was to come to them with a lot of sort of heavy conversations. I gave regular updates about the state of student mental health on campus. I appreciate the call out from both of you that students really are struggling. And additionally, students can see that as well, and we want to help our peers. So we would sit around in our weekly meetings, and talk about which mental health clubs were doing what and where we could plug in better. But what I had noticed was there was some hesitancy with those conversations. I think, as we've talked about, everybody comes to school or to college with different life experiences, different biases about mental health and mental illness. And so we needed some sort of great equalizer to get us all on the same page in order to move forward with these conversations about the counseling center or about different student clubs beyond mental health. We had secretaries of DEI, secretaries of gender and sexuality. We were figuring out a plan to implement Title IX more heavily into our student life. So heavy conversations. And about midway through the school year, I sent everybody in the student government home with the Kognito link to take the peer-to-peer training that I did. And the next week that they came back, we debriefed it together. And I absolutely started seeing changes in the ways that people would perk up during our conversations about mental health resources on campus. They wanted to talk about it more. And I think they had that confidence that they had the correct language to use. Sometimes people are just nervous about, saying the wrong thing or their intent coming across wrong. And I really needed to hear their voices. So after they had the skills, we were able to make significant changes in the way that we talked about it. And I am sure that they went home and were able to use those skills amongst their peer groups and friends. But not only that, we were able to use it on an organizational level. And the last result of that was we then required it for all of our other student orgs in order to receive their funding for the next year. We said, you all should take Kognito as well, every single one of your members, just because, especially as a student leader, you need to be well versed in these conversations. So that was one of the best, experiences I saw this year on campus, and I was really happy with how it turned out.
I love that. For those of us who work here at Kognito, we're also always saying, man, this has really improved my conversations at home as well. These are really transferable skills that improve so many of our interactions, which improves the whole experience for everyone around us, right? As we're improving those interactions, we're improving that whole experience.
Thanks, Kim. I want to thank each of you for delivering a really powerful presentation today. For more information on our products and for future information about upcoming webinars, please visit kognito.com. Thank you.